When my father died, my siblings laughed at me. They walked away with millions, shiny titles, and seats at his $150 million company. I walked away with an envelope, thin, weightless, humiliating. Inside it was no check, no letter of love, just a single gold cufflink and a note that read, "We're this on the day of the annual board meeting." They called it my consolation prize. But that day, when I stepped into the boardroom wearing that cufflink, something happened none of us expected. The director stopped my speech mid-sentence, made a phone call, and 15 minutes later walked back in with the company's lawyer, a man who only appears when destinies are rewritten. Before we continue, be part of our growing family by hitting that subscribe button. And here's something fun. Share your name and tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments. We might feature you with a shout out in our next video, because your support truly means the world to us. Now, let's proceed. My name has never been the one spoken with reverence. Not at school plays, not at graduations, not even at the dinner table when stories of real dads came up. I was always the man who stepped in after her father was gone, the one who married her mother and stayed when the world expected me to drift away. Some call me patient, others call me stubborn. But to my stepdaughter, Emily, I was something in between, there, but never quite enough. That night, at her wedding, I sat quietly at the second row. I didn't ask for the front. That was reserved for her biological relatives who came crawling out of the woodwork after years of absence. I didn't mind. I had gotten used to being the shadow in family portraits, the one people cropped around, the figure they'd never speak of when the stories were retold. The hall glittered with golden lights, chandeliers dangling like stars, glasses clinking, and violins softening the air. Emily looked radiant, her dress flowing like her mother's once had. For a moment, I thought I saw her mother, my late wife, standing there, alive again. My chest tightened, but I kept my smile steady. Then came the speeches. The best man, flushed with champagne, stumbled through jokes. Emily's friends shared sweet stories of her kindness, her stubborn drive, her laughter. Then it was her husband's turn, Derek. He took the microphone with the swagger of a man who believed the room existed to applaud him. He began charmingly enough, thanking guests, laughing about how long it took Emily to say yes. People smiled, nodded, raised glasses. And then he shifted. "You know, some people in this room probably wonder how I won her heart," he said, grinning wide. "I'll tell you, it wasn't by pretending to be something I'm not. Some folks, they like to step into shoes they were never meant to fill. They play house. They try to be fathers, try to be husbands. But truth is, no one ever forgets the real thing." A ripple moved through the hall. My jaw locked. I didn't breathe. He smirked, as if daring me to react. "And let's not forget the dearly departed," he added. "God rest her soul. Though if she could see this night, maybe she'd finally admit her story ended too soon. And the rest of us? Well, we just moved on." Silence. Absolute silence. Even the waiters froze mid-step. I felt every eye flicker toward me, but I didn't move. I thought of my wife. Her laughter, her voice saying respect is not claimed in words, but revealed in moments. My fists tightened against the tablecloth. Emily's face drained of color. She stood up suddenly, her chair screeching against the floor. All eyes snapped to her. "At least," she said, voice trembling but sharp as glass, "I belong right where I am." The words sliced through the air, colder than the champagne. Derek's grin faltered, but he laughed it off, raising his glass as if he'd made some clever joke. But no one laughed with him. The room had turned to stone. I rose quietly. My chair barely scraped. I didn't say a word. No toast. No confrontation. I simply walked toward the doors, each step measured, each breath steady. The silence behind me weighed more than applause ever could. The night air outside hit me like water on fire. Cool, sharp, cleansing. I kept walking, past the valet, past the curious stares, until the music inside faded into nothing but a dull echo in my chest. I had been mocked before. I had been dismissed before. But never, not once, Had anyone dared to drag her memory through the mud? That night, I swore it would not be forgotten. And as I disappeared into the dark, no one in that hall could have known. The next time I touched their lives, it would be at a moment they least expected. The morning after the wedding, the city woke slow and hungover. Rain tapped lightly against the windows of the hotel where Emily and Derek had spent their first night as husband and wife. The suite smelled of champagne, roses, and exhaustion. Derek stretched lazily across the bed, smirking to himself. "Well," he said, "if last night is any sign of our life together, I think I'm going to enjoy this marriage." Emily sat at the vanity, brushing her hair. Her eyes, though, weren't soft. They were tired, restless, carrying something Derek didn't notice. She hadn't spoken much since the reception, not after what he'd said. She forced a smile, her reflection barely convincing. "We should get downstairs. The Uber will be here any minute." Derek waved a hand. "Relax, babe. We're flying to paradise. Nothing can touch us now." But as he said it, his phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again, persistent. He frowned, reaching for it on the nightstand. "Who the hell's calling me this early?" Emily glanced over, uninterested, until she saw the name on the screen. Her breath caught. The brush slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Derek squinted at the caller ID, then barked a laugh. Why would they be calling me?" Emily's voice trembled. "Answer it." "Why?" he scoffed. "This has to be some mistake." Her tone sharpened, cutting through his arrogance. "Derek, answer it." He rolled his eyes, but swiped to accept, pressing the phone to his ear. "Yeah? Who's this?" At first, only silence. Then a voice came through, low, steady, unshaken. "Derek, Emily, this is Margaret's brother." Emily gasped, clutching the edge of the vanity for balance. Margaret, her mother, gone for years. But that voice carried her name like it had been spoken yesterday. Derek's grin faltered. Her brother? Why the hell would you?" The voice cut him off. "I promised Margaret I'd make this call on her behalf. She left something for Emily. For today." Emily's eyes widened, filling with tears. "For me?" she whispered, barely audible. "Yes," the voice said gently. "She wrote you a letter. She recorded something, too. She wanted it given to you on your wedding day. And your stepfather, he's kept it safe all these years." The room froze. Even Derek, ever the loudest in any room, was speechless. "She wanted me to wait until the right time," the voice continued. "Last night, that time came." Emily's heart hammered. The words wrapped around her like her mother's arms, long lost, but suddenly near. Derek forced a laugh, thin and nervous. "Okay, this is absurd. She's been gone for years. Why drag up the past now? We should be celebrating, not drowning in." "Enough." Emily's voice cracked like thunder. Her reflection in the mirror didn't look like a bride anymore. It looked like a woman on the edge of something vast and terrifying. "Put it on speaker." Derek hesitated. Her stare burned into him until he obeyed. The voice deepened, heavy with memory. "Emily, your mother spoke of you every day in those final months. She said you were her light, her hope. She asked me to tell you this. When the world tests you, when someone belittles what matters most, don't shrink. Don't turn bitter. Stand, even if you stand alone." Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his bravado leaking away with every word. "And one more thing," the voice added. She said, "If Emily is ever made to feel small on her wedding day, let her know that the one who stood in my place, her stepfather, is the one who carried her farther than anyone else." The air in the room shattered. Derek paled, his throat tightening. Emily's sobs filled the silence, raw and unrestrained. The call ended abruptly, leaving only the dead tone buzzing in the air. Emily turned slowly, her eyes fixed on Derek, not with sorrow, but with fire. And in that fire, he saw something he had never seen in her before: resolve. "Emily," he stammered, raising his hands. "You know I was just joking." It was a speech. People laugh. It didn't mean. But her face told him the truth he didn't want to face. She wasn't going to that airport. She wasn't going on that honeymoon. Not with him. The Uber waited at the curb with its engine humming, but upstairs in the hotel suite, the world had shifted. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her wedding dress folded neatly across the chair like a relic from another life. Her hands trembled as she held the phone, scrolling back to the missed call. Her mother's brother. Her mother's words. The weight of it pressed against her chest, harder than the silence that filled the room. Derek paced near the window, tugging at his tie. His voice was sharp, defensive, brittle. "You're seriously going to let that call get in your head? Emily, come on." It was sentimental nonsense. Old letters, recordings. It's just people clinging to the past. Emily's eyes lifted slowly. They were red from crying, but steady. "You mocked her. You mocked him. It was a joke," Derek snapped. "A wedding speech. You want everyone to act like it's scripture? Don't you think you're being a little dramatic?" Emily stood. Her voice was low, but it carried. "That was the first time I've heard my mother's voice since she died. Do you even understand what that means?" Derek froze, his mouth half open, but no words came. Before he could respond, the phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Emily snatched it, her eyes scanning the screen. It was an address. A short message followed. "It's waiting for you." Her pulse quickened. She grabbed her purse and shoes. "Where are you going?" Derek demanded, stepping in front of the door. She looked at him like he was nothing more than furniture in her way. "To hear what my mother left me." "Emily, think about this. We have a flight to catch. A honeymoon. Our life is starting." She cut him off with a single glance. "My life doesn't start with you mocking the only people who ever truly raised me." Her words struck harder than any slap. Derek's face twisted, half in anger, half in disbelief. He reached for her arm, but she pulled away with a force that surprised even herself. Minutes later, the Uber meant for their honeymoon carried Emily across the city instead, Derek silent in the back seat, clenching his fists like a child denied his toy. The car stopped in front of a small law office. The kind of place with fading gold letters on the door and curtains drawn against the morning sun. Emily's heart raced as she stepped inside. A man in his 60s greeted her in the lobby, calm, solemn, familiar. Her uncle. He looked at her with a mix of sorrow and pride. She knew this day would come. Emily's knees weakened, but she nodded. "I need to hear it." He guided her into a private office. On the desk sat a small box, worn at the edges. Inside was a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with time, and a USB drive marked in her mother's handwriting. For Emily. Emily's hands shook as she lifted the letter first. She broke the seal carefully, unfolding paper that carried not just words, but the scent of lavender her mother used to keep in drawers. The letter began simply, "My Emily, if you are reading this, it means you've found love. It means life has carried you into a future I cannot walk beside you in. But know this, I am with you." Tears blurred the ink, but she kept reading. The words spoke of pride, of encouragement, of strength. And then they shifted, sharper. "Be wary of those who mock what they do not understand. A man who belittles the dead will never honor the living. Choose carefully who walks beside you." Emily's breath caught. She looked at Derek, who stood stiff in the corner, arms crossed, but his eyes betrayed the truth, fear. Her uncle slid the USB into a laptop. The screen flickered, and then her mother's face appeared. Thin, frail, but smiling. "Emily." The recording began, her voice warm, alive. "If you're watching this, then today is your wedding day. And though I can't be there, I want you to know, I see you. I see the woman you've become. And I am proud. So proud." The room dissolved into sobs. Emily covered her mouth, staring at the screen as if she could reach through it. Then her mother's expression grew serious. "And to the man you've chosen, if you cannot honor her, if you cannot honor me, then leave. Because my daughter deserves better than silence when cruelty speaks." The video ended. Emily's body trembled, caught between grief and fury. Derek shifted, his voice breaking. Emily, you can't possibly think she meant me. She didn't know me. Emily turned, her face cold, her mother's strength burning in her eyes. I think she knew you better than you know yourself. She walked past him, toward the door. And for the first time since the wedding, Derek realized she might not be walking back. The hotel ballroom looked different in the morning light. Empty glasses and half-wilted flowers littered the tables, but the stage still stood, microphone waiting like an unburied truth. Family members who hadn't yet left town had gathered again, some for brunch, some for gossip, all still whispering about the silence that ended last night's celebration. Emily walked into that silence, her footsteps steady, her eyes red but resolute. Derek trailed behind her, pale and agitated, muttering half-hearted excuses. He looked less like a groom now and more like a man dragged before a jury. Conversations died as she reached the center of the room. Heads turned, forks clinked against plates, and all at once, the people who had witnessed Derek's speech the night before realized this was no ordinary brunch. Emily lifted a glass of water, not champagne. Her voice wavered for only a second before finding strength. Last night, she began, a moment was stolen from me. A moment that should have been filled with joy and honor was turned into mockery. And I stayed silent. I thought I had no voice left to defend what mattered most. She glanced toward her stepfather, seated quietly in the back, his eyes fixed on the table. He hadn't wanted to come. He hadn't wanted a scene. But she had insisted. Her voice rose. But today, I heard my mother's voice again. And through her words, I remembered that silence is not strength when truth is at stake. Gasps echoed as Emily pulled the envelope from her purse. She held it high. This is the letter my mother left me, on this day. Her words were clear. Choose carefully who walks beside you. Last night, one man reminded me of that truth. And another showed me what happens when a man forgets it. All eyes shifted toward Derek. His face flushed crimson. Emily, don't, he hissed. But she spoke louder. Derek mocked my stepfather. He mocked my mother. And in doing so, he revealed who he truly is. I can forgive many things, but not that. The room pulsed with silence, thick and sharp. Then Emily turned, her gaze locking on her stepfather. Her voice softened. You never asked for recognition. You never demanded the title of father. But last night, I finally understood. You've been the one carrying me all along. The glass in her hand trembled, but she lifted it higher. So today, I raised my final wedding toast. Not to a husband who failed me before our marriage even began, but to the man who stood by my mother and then by me. To the man who knew when to be silent and when to let her voice speak louder than his own. To the man I am proud to call my father. The room erupted, not in applause, but in something heavier. Tears. Nods. The kind of silence that wasn't empty but full, reverent. Her stepfather lifted his head at last, his eyes wet. He didn't raise a glass. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. Derek stumbled forward, his voice cracking. Emily, you can't just throw this away. We're married. We have vows, papers, witnesses. Emily cut him off, her tone final. What good are vows if the man who spoke them has no respect for the people who made me who I am? He opened his mouth to protest, but the room itself seemed to reject him. Every eye turned cold, every chair shifted away. For the first time, Derek was not the center. He was the shadow. Emily set the glass down gently, her hands no longer trembling. This marriage ended before it began. And if I have to start my life today without you, then so be it. Because I will not dishonor the ones who gave me strength. She turned her back on him, walked toward her stepfather, reached out her hand, and when he stood beside her, the room understood. The real union celebrated that weekend was not one of paper and rings, but of blood, memory, and respect. Derek stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. No one followed him. Emily lifted the letter once more, her voice steady. My mother was right. Respect doesn't demand the last word. It waits, and when the time is right, it speaks. The glass clinked gently as she set it down. And for the first time since her mother's passing, Emily felt at peace, not because she had found love in a husband, but because she had found truth in a father. That night, the city outside my apartment window burned with light, towers glowing like torches against the dark. But inside my room, everything was still. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, the gold cufflink glinting faintly on my wrist, as if it were breathing. On my desk lay the sealed envelope the lawyer had given me. My name was written in my father's handwriting, bold, deliberate, unshaken even by age or illness. I traced the letters with my finger, remembering how that same hand once held mine as we walked through the company halls when I was a boy. He never told me I would inherit anything, never hinted at it. If anything, he made me feel small on purpose, always making me earn every ounce of attention, every nod of approval. Maybe that was his way of building me, or maybe he was simply preparing me for a world that didn't care who your father was. With a deep breath, I broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No long letter, no apology, just a few lines in his steady script. Elias, the cufflink is the key. But remember, a key can open or destroy. Use it to unite what I built, not to avenge what they took. If you lead with silence, you will hear what others can't. Your time begins now. That was it. No, I'm proud of you. No warmth. Just another test, another puzzle wrapped in legacy. The next morning, the world already knew. News outlets, financial papers, even gossip sites, all running the same headline. The unknown son named CEO of Grant Industries. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from journalists, investors, and a few distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years. But the ones I was waiting for, my siblings, didn't call. Not one. By noon, I was back in the executive building, now my building, stepping into the office that had belonged to my father. It smelled faintly of leather and cologne, just like he always did. The walls were lined with his awards, his photos, his legacy, reminders of the giant I was expected to replace. I sat in his chair. It felt too big. The director entered quietly. "Congratulations, Mr. Grant," he said, his voice respectful but cautious. "The transition paperwork is being processed. The board will back you, for now. But you should know, your siblings are already meeting privately." I nodded slowly. I expected that. He hesitated. "They'll try to rally support. Some of the shareholders are nervous about your appointment." "Let them talk," I said. "My father didn't build this company on fear." The director's eyes softened. "No, he built it on discipline and mystery." He gave a faint smile. "You're your father's son, whether you know it or not." After he left, I walked to the window and looked down at the city. From here, everything looked smaller, even the chaos. My father must have stood here 1,000 times, watching the world move below him. And now, somehow, I was the one standing where he once stood. By afternoon, the board requested a private meeting, a stability session, they called it. When I walked in, I saw my siblings already there. My sister was dressed sharply, confidence restored. My brothers flanked her like guards. My mother sat beside them, calm and regal, but her eyes were sharper than I'd ever seen. "Elias," my sister began smoothly, "we've had time to think. Father's decision was unconventional, but if it's truly what he wanted, we'll stand by it." Her tone was sugar over glass. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." But my eldest brother cut in, leaning forward. "We think it's only right that decisions be made collaboratively. You know, as a family, you're new to leadership. We could guide you." "Guide me." The word hung in the air like a leash. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to consider. "You mean control me?" His smile faltered. "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." My mother finally spoke, her voice soft but cold. "Elias, leadership isn't about defiance. It's about balance. Your father may have given you a title, but this family holds the roots of this company. Without us, it will crumble." I met her gaze steadily. "If you believe that, You wouldn't be trying to scare me on my second day." For a moment, her mask slipped. Just a flicker of pride mixed with fury. "You sound like him," she whispered. The room fell silent. I rose from my seat and walked to the center of the table. "I won't push anyone out," I said. "But things will change. No more backroom deals. No more name games. If you want to work with me, you'll do it transparently. If not," my brother scoffed. "You'll what?" "Fire us." I smiled faintly. "I won't need to. The board doesn't protect people who sink their own ship." The lawyer's voice echoed in my memory. "Any act of obstruction will result in forfeiture." My siblings knew it too. They went quiet, exchanging glances. I continued. "Father didn't choose me to punish you. He chose me to remind you what this company was built on. It wasn't greed. It was grit." For the first time, none of them laughed. The meeting ended in uneasy silence. As they left, my mother lingered by the door. "Elias," she said quietly, "your father's games were always dangerous. Be careful you don't become one of them." "I already am one of them," I said softly. "That's why I understand how to end it." She didn't respond. She just left. Hours later, after everyone was gone, I stayed behind. The office was quiet except for the hum of the city below. I took the cufflink off and turned it in my palm, studying the small engraving again, a stylized letter G with a faint seam running through the edge. Something about it caught my eye. A groove, almost invisible. I pressed my thumb against it. The cufflink clicked open. Inside was a tiny rolled strip of paper. I pulled it out carefully, my heart racing. Another message, shorter than the last. "You have their attention. Now earn their loyalty. The real test begins when you stop proving and start forgiving." I sank back into the chair, the weight of the message settling deep in my chest. My father hadn't just left me power. He'd left me a path. But forgiveness, that was the hardest test of all. Because as I stared out into the dark skyline, I could see my brother's office lights flicker on across the street. They were still in the building, still plotting. And I knew they weren't finished trying to take back what I'd just inherited. The email came just past midnight. The building was dark except for my office light and the glow of my screen. I'd stayed late again, half out of habit, half out of suspicion that my siblings were still scheming after hours. The cinder line froze me in place. S. Grant. My father's initials. For a long minute, I just stared, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. The logical part of me whispered that it was impossible. My father had been gone for months. Yet the subject line, "Final Directive," pulled me in like gravity. I clicked. Inside was a single attachment, a video file. I hesitated before pressing play, afraid of what I'd see. Then my father's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his study, the same one I'd walked past 1,000 times but never been invited into. His eyes were tired but steady, his voice lower than I remembered. "If you're watching this, Elias, it means the cufflink has done its job." He smiled faintly. "I knew your brothers and sister would reach for power. I raised them to. But I needed at least one of you to reach for purpose. The cufflink wasn't a gift, it was a filter. A quiet man is often mistaken for a weak one, but I learned early that silence is a language only leaders speak fluently. You understood that long before they did." He paused, letting the words breathe. "You'll be tempted to prove yourself by punishing them. Don't. They've already punished themselves with pride. Your job isn't to win against them. It's to build something they'll want to belong to again." He leaned closer to the camera. "And if you've opened the cufflink, you've seen the second note. Forgiveness isn't a command, son. It's your weapon. Use it wisely." The video ended there. The screen went black. I sat in silence, feeling both seen and haunted. It was as if he'd predicted every thought I'd had since stepping into his chair. By morning, I made my choice. When the board convened for the official transition ceremony, my siblings arrived with forced smiles. Their lawyers lingered in the hallway, just in case the day turned ugly. My mother didn't come at all. I stood at the head of the long table, the cufflink gleaming on my wrist. Cameras flashed as shareholders filled the seats. The director called the meeting to order and turned the floor over to me. I know most of you expected a different face standing here today, I began. Maybe a louder one, maybe one born for boardrooms. But my father built this company on something quieter than ambition. He built it on endurance, on knowing when to speak and when to listen. I looked directly at my siblings. That's why I'm not removing anyone from their positions. You'll all keep your roles. But from now on, your titles mean nothing without results. Shock rippled across the table. Even the director looked surprised. My sister frowned. You're keeping us? I nodded. Your family. And whether you like it or not, we still carry the same name on every door in this building. But if you sabotage me again, if you tear down what father built, you won't be fighting me. You'll be fighting his legacy. My oldest brother leaned forward, confused but cautious. Why are you doing this? Because father didn't choose me to win against you, I said quietly. He chose me to fix what we broke together. For the first time, none of them had a comeback. The cameras clicked. Investors murmured approval. Something in the room shifted, a sense of stability replacing chaos. But beneath the surface, another current was moving. Later that day, while reviewing the company's digital archives, I found something strange. A hidden file buried deep in the founder's database, accessible only through my father's personal encryption key, the same pattern etched into the cufflink's inner seam. I uploaded the code, and the file unfolded into a document labeled Transfer Protocol, GFA Shares. My heart skipped. The file detailed a secret stock redistribution plan. 51% of company shares automatically transferred to the Cufflink's registered bearer upon activation. The rest remained divided among the family. I leaned back, realization flooding through me. I didn't just inherit the title. I controlled the company outright. My father hadn't given me power to share, it was power to protect. That night, I stood alone in his office again, city lights flickering below like restless stars. I thought about what to do with what I now held. I could tighten my grip, crush every rival. But I heard his voice again, clear as when I was a child. The real test begins when you stop proving and start forgiving. So I didn't announce it. I didn't flaunt it. I locked the file away and swore to use it only if the family ever tore itself apart again. Weeks passed. Slowly, the company began to stabilize. Investors returned. Profits rose. My siblings, cautious but curious, started working with me instead of against me. We weren't a family yet. Not really. But we were at least a team. One evening, as I was leaving the building, my sister caught up with me in the lobby. Elias, she said softly, father would have been proud of you. I smiled faintly. No, he would have said, finally. She laughed quietly, and for the first time, it didn't sound cruel. When I got home, I placed the cufflink back into its box. The gold gleamed under the lamp, a symbol of everything I'd lost and everything I'd become. I whispered into the stillness, "You were right, father. Silence does speak louder." Then I closed the box. But as the lid shut, I noticed something beneath the velvet lining, an engraving so small I'd missed it before. For words, etched in my father's precise hand. The second cufflink awaits. My breath caught. So there was another, somewhere. And the story of the cufflinks, the story of who my father really was, wasn't over. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us.